It is 6 o'clock in the morning, October of 1947, and Earl Dempsey is unlocking the back door of the majestic diner on Lackawanna Avenue in Scranton, Pennsylvania. The griddle has been cold all night, and the first thing Earl does, before he even takes off his coat, is turn the gas valve and set his palm an inch above the black steel, waiting for the warmth to rise up and meet him. By 6:30, the coffee urn is grumbling, the cream is in the little glass pitchers, and the first miners coming off the night shift are settling onto the red stools with that particular sigh of men who have earned their breakfast. And Earl begins to build the same sandwich he will build maybe 400 times before 9 o'clock. It costs 15 cents. It has exactly 4 ingredients, and when it is made right, on a well-loved griddle, by a man who has made it 10,000 times, there may be no finer breakfast in the history of this country. That sandwich sits at the very top of this list, at number 1, and we are going to stand at Earl's elbow and watch him make it before this morning is over. But we have a long counter to walk first. Along the way you will meet, at number 13, a breakfast sandwich that contained no bread at all, not one single slice, and truck drivers across Nebraska ordered it by the dozen. And waiting at number 5 is a sandwich the griddle man built on a glazed donut, split sideways and laid face down on the hot steel until the sugar turned to candy. If that sounds impossible, well, so did a lot of things before you tasted them. So pour yourself a cup, and let's go back to the years after the war, when every town in America, and I mean every town, had a counter where breakfast happened. Maybe it was a chrome diner out by the highway, shining like a toaster in the morning sun. Maybe it was the lunch counter at the Five and Dime, or the marble counter at the corner drugstore, where the same waitress had poured your father's coffee for 20 years and knew how he took it without asking. These were not restaurants, exactly. They were rooms where a town said good morning to itself, and on those griddles, between the hot cakes and the hash, lived a whole family of breakfast sandwiches that have almost completely disappeared. Not because they weren't good. Most of them were wonderful. They disappeared because the world changed around them. One interstate, one drive-through window, one closed factory at a time. Today we are going to remember 25 of them, one by one, counting down to the most beloved breakfast sandwich America ever lost. If mornings like these sound like the ones you grew up with, or the ones your mother told you about, I hope you'll subscribe and keep a stool warm here, because every week we sit back down at another counter that time forgot. Now, the griddle is hot. Let's begin. Number 25, the fried bologna and egg. We start in Zanesville, Ohio, at a little place called the Bluebird Diner in 1949. The Bluebird sat across the street from a pottery works, and when the 7 o'clock whistle blew, the men had 30 minutes and not 1 minute more. The answer to that clock was a thick slice of bologna, cut by hand from a big pink chub the size of your forearm, never from a package. The griddle man, a wiry fellow the regulars called Shorty, would score the edge of the slice with 4 little cuts of his knife. That was the secret, and every griddle man knew it. Without those cuts, bologna curls up into a cup on the heat. With them, it lies flat and fries like a piece of ham, crisping brown and lacy at the edges. While the bologna sizzled, Shorty cracked an egg right beside it, broke the yolk with the corner of his spatula, and flipped it once. 2 slices of white bread went face down in the bologna grease for half a minute, just long enough to toast to gold. Then the stack. Bread, bologna, egg, a stripe of yellow mustard, bread. Wrapped in waxed paper if you were walking, served on a heavy white plate if you had time to sit. It cost 20 cents with coffee. The men called it the poor man's ham and egg, but nobody said it sadly, because fried bologna, when it is thick cut and properly scored, has a smoky, salty char all its own. So why did it vanish? Bologna became a thin, flabby thing in plastic packages, a lunchbox punchline instead of a butcher's pride. The pottery works closed in the 60s, the whistle stopped blowing, and the bluebird stools emptied out one by one. But hold that thought about factory whistles, because the sandwich coming up next was built for an even earlier alarm clock, and it came out of a black iron pan in Pennsylvania Dutch country. Number 24. The Scrapple Sandwich. Reading, Pennsylvania, 1947, at the lunch counter inside Kessler's drugstore on Penn Street. If you did not grow up within 100 miles of Philadelphia, you may need an introduction, and if you did grow up there, your mouth is already watering. Scrapple is the old Pennsylvania Dutch answer to the question of wasting nothing. Pork and cornmeal and sage, cooked down together, poured into a loaf pan, and chilled until it slices like bread. On its own, cold, it is humble. But listen to what happened at Kessler's counter every morning. The counterman cut 2 slices off the gray loaf, each about as thick as your finger, and laid them on the well-greased griddle. And then, and this was the whole art of it, he left them alone. A full 5 minutes aside, no peeking, no pressing, until each slice built a crust, so brown and so crisp, it crackled under the spatula. Inside, the scrapple stayed soft as warm spoon bread. Those 2 slices went between 2 pieces of buttered toast, with nothing but a thin line of ketchup, though the old-timers took apple butter instead, sweet against the sage and pepper. A quarter bought the sandwich, and a cup of coffee, and the pharmacist himself ate one standing up every single morning at 8, still in his white coat. It vanished the way the drugstore counters vanished. When the chain stores bought out the corner pharmacies in the 60s and 70s, they ripped out the counters to make room for shelving, and a food that only really lived at those counters lost its home. You can still find Scrapple in Pennsylvania, bless it, but the sandwich, hot off a drugstore griddle at 8 in the morning, that is gone. And speaking of breakfast built for travelers, our next stop is a railroad platform in Colorado, where a sandwich had exactly 5 minutes to exist. Number 23. The Depot Special. La Junta, Colorado, 1946, at the Santa Fe lunchroom, right on the platform where the big silver trains sighed to a stop on their way between Chicago and Los Angeles. Here is a sandwich shaped entirely by a timetable. When a train pulled in, passengers had somewhere between 5 and 10 minutes to get down the steps, get fed, and get back aboard. So the ladies behind that counter, in their starched aprons with their hair pinned just so, ran breakfast like a beautiful machine. The moment the conductor wired ahead with the passenger count, the griddle filled with rows of round ham slices and rows of eggs cracked into steel rings so they cooked into perfect circles. Soft round buns, brushed with melted butter, toasted alongside. When the train's brakes hissed outside, the assembly began. Bun, a smear of mustard butter, hot ham, a firm yolked egg, because a runny yolk on a moving train is nobody's friend, and the top of the bun pressed down with a gloved palm. Each one went into a square of paper, folded like a gift, and was set on the counter in ranks like soldiers. 30 cents, coffee poured into a heavy mug you drank right there, or a paper cup if you ran. Travelers wrote letters home about those 5 minutes in La Junta. What killed it was simply the airplane, and then the highway. Passenger trains thinned out through the 50s, the great lunchrooms closed one by one, and a sandwich that existed only in the space between 2 whistles disappeared with them. But do not think every vanished sandwich was so sensible. The next one sounds like a dare, and in Nashville, Tennessee, grown men lined up for it. Number 22. The Peanut Butter and Bacon on Griddle Toast. The Hermitage Lunch, a narrow little counter off Church Street in Nashville, 1950. 12 stools, a ceiling fan, and a griddle man named Dewey, who wore his paper hat tipped back, like he was about to tell you something good. Now, peanut butter for breakfast was nothing strange in those years. Mothers spread it on toast in every kitchen in America, because it was cheap, and it stuck to your ribs. But Dewey did something to it. He took 2 slices of white bread and buttered the outsides, like you would for a grilled cheese. Inside went a thick, generous layer of peanut butter, and across the peanut butter he laid 4 strips of bacon, fried stiff as Venetian blind slats, still warm, so the fat softened into the peanut butter the moment they touched. Then the whole sandwich went onto the griddle under a press weight, and here is where the magic happened. The heat toasted the bread to a deep gold, and it half-melted the peanut butter into something between a spread and a sauce, salty and roasted and running slow as honey. Some mornings, for the sweet-toothed regulars, Dewey added a few coins of banana or a spoon of grape jelly, but the purists took it plain and dunked the corners in black coffee. 20 cents. The stenographers from the insurance building 2 doors down ate them in white gloves, holding the waxed paper like a corsage. Why did it fade away? Peanut butter got filed under children's food somewhere in the 60s, and a counterman melting it on a griddle for grown adults started to seem old-fashioned, then eccentric, then it simply stopped. Which is a shame, because salty and sweet and hot is a combination that never stopped being right. And if you think peanut butter was the humblest thing ever slid across a breakfast counter, wait until you hear what the veterans kept ordering at a roadside cafe in Pennsylvania, years after the Army stopped serving it to them. Number 21. The Creamed Chipped Beef Sandwich. The Blue Star Cafe stood on Route 22, outside Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and in 1946, its counter was shoulder to shoulder every morning with men just home from the war. Every one of them had eaten creamed chipped beef in the service, thin shavings of dried beef in a white pepper gravy, ladled over toast, and every one of them had called it a name I will not repeat in polite company. They swore up and down they never wanted to see it again, and yet there they sat, ordering it by the plateful. Ask any of their wives, and they could tell you why. It tasted like the fellows they had eaten it with. The Blue Star did it better than the Army ever dreamed. The cook, a widow named Ruth Ann who owned the place outright, made her gravy with whole milk and good butter, plenty of black pepper, and soaked the salt out of the dried beef first, which the Army never bothered to do. But the sandwich, the reason it makes this list, was her invention. Instead of an open plate, she took a long, soft roll, hollowed out some of the crumb, toasted it face down in butter, and ladled the creamed beef into the trough of it, so a working man could pick the thing up, more or less, with one hand on the wheel of his truck. She called it the Turnpike Special, because the new Pennsylvania Turnpike ran men past her door at all hours. 35 cents, and she never once raised the price on a veteran. It vanished when Ruth Ann retired in 1961, and more broadly, when dried beef itself slipped off the grocery shelf, a war and depression food that the prosperous new suburbs were happy to forget. The veterans never forgot, though. Their grandchildren still argue about the recipe. Now, from white gravy we go to something bolder, because the next sandwich needed rye bread, raw onion, and a certain amount of courage, and Milwaukee had all three. Number 20. The liverwurst and fried egg on rye. Schmidt's, a lunch counter on the near south side of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 1948, in a neighborhood where the morning smelled like bakery bread and the breweries down the block. Liverwurst, in that town, was not a dare. It was a birthright, made by butchers whose fathers had made it in the old country, smooth as cold butter and rich as pate, because that is what it was, really, a working man's pate. Old man Schmidt built the sandwich like this: 2 slices of seeded rye, fresh that morning from the bakery next door, toasted light so they stayed a little tender, a thick layer of liverwurst on the bottom slice, spread all the way to the edges, none of this stingy business, then a fried egg straight off the griddle, cooked over medium so the yolk was fudgy, not runny, laid right on the liverwurst so the warmth loosened it. On top of the egg, a few rings of raw onion, sliced paper thin, and a stroke of sharp brown mustard on the top slice of rye. That was the whole sandwich, and the brewery men ate it at 6 in the morning with black coffee, and it held them until the lunch whistle without a whisper of complaint. A quarter, and worth double. What happened to it is what happened to a whole world of food. The children of those brewery men moved out to the new suburbs, where the supermarkets carried liverwurst in a plastic tube if they carried it at all, and organ meat slid quietly off the American table through the 60s and 70s, tarred as old world, old-fashioned, or worse, unhealthy. The corner butcher shops closed, and without the butcher, the sandwich had no heart. But if liverwurst at dawn sounds hearty, the fishermen of Massachusetts would like a word, because the next sandwich came off the boats, and it put codfish on the breakfast table. Number 19. The Codfish Cake and Egg Sandwich. Gloucester, Massachusetts, 1947, at a wharfside counter called the Harbor Lunch, where the windows fogged over every dawn from the steam of the coffee urn and the talk of men who had been at sea since 3. In New England in those years, a codfish cake at breakfast was as ordinary as bacon. Salt cod soaked overnight, flaked and beaten into mashed potatoes with an egg and plenty of pepper, patted into cakes, and fried in salt pork drippings until the outside crackled. The Harbor Lunch made theirs the size of a hockey puck and twice as thick, and some genius, nobody ever agreed on who, decided one morning to put one on a bun. It went like this: a soft white bun, split and toasted on the griddle in those same drippings, the hot codfish cake, crushed gently under the spatula so it sat flat, a fried egg on top, cooked hard, because these were men with oilskins on, and the crowning touch, a spoonful of tartar sauce on the bottom bun and a shake of malt vinegar over the fish. Salty, crisp, creamy, sharp. 30 cents, and the counterman had it in your hands before your coffee stopped swaying. The fishermen called it a deckhand's breakfast, and wives made the Friday supper version at home. But the sandwich belonged to the wharf. It faded as the fishing fleet faded. Fewer boats every decade. The salt cod trade shrinking, the old waterfront lunchrooms giving way, one by one, to gift shops as the tourists moved in. By the 70s, codfish at breakfast sounded to most of the country like something out of a whaling novel. Their loss. Now we leave the salt air and head for a drugstore in Boston, where breakfast came out of a little tin with a devil on the label, and somehow that was the most trusted food in town. Number 18. The Deviled Ham and Egg on Toast. Adam's Drug, on a corner in Boston, Massachusetts, 1952. The marble counter ran the whole length of the store, cool under your forearms even in August, and behind it stood a counterman named Francis, who could crack 2 eggs one-handed and had not gotten an order wrong in 19 years. The star of his morning was a little paper-wrapped tin that sat in a pyramid on the back shelf, deviled ham, ground fine and spiked with mustard and spice. Housewives trusted that tin the way they trusted the flag. Francis turned it into breakfast like this. He spread the deviled ham thick on one slice of white toast, right to the corners. On the griddle he made what the menu called a rumbled egg, 2 eggs scrambled soft and folded like a handkerchief, still glossy. The egg went on the ham. A slice of American cheese went on the egg, while it was hot enough to slump, and the second slice of toast capped it, cut corner to corner into triangles, because at a drugstore counter, presentation mattered. 30 cents, and it came with a glass of tomato juice on Fridays for a nickel more. Secretaries on their way to the insurance offices ate it in 10 minutes flat, hats still pinned on. The spice of the ham against the mild egg and cheese was the whole trick, a little heat before a long day. Its disappearance was quiet. The drugstore counters went first, and then deviled ham itself drifted to the back of the pantry, a hurricane supply food instead of a breakfast. The tins are still down at the store, you know, same little paper wrapper. Hardly anybody remembers what Francis knew to do with one, and from a sandwich the secretaries loved, we go to one the church ladies swore by, out in Kansas, involving a jar of olives before 8 in the morning. Number 17. The Egg and Olive. Miller's Drugstore, Wichita, Kansas, 1951. Now this one, I will admit, sounds like a misprint. Green olives at breakfast. But the ladies of Wichita knew better, and I will defend them to my last breath. The egg and olive was royalty at mid-century lunch counters, usually at noon, but at Miller's it crossed over into breakfast, and here is why. The counterwoman, a tall, unhurried widow named Opal, hard-boiled her eggs the night before, 24 at a time, and in the morning she chopped them fine while they were still cool. Folded in mayonnaise, she thinned with a spoonful of olive brine, and then added a full handful of chopped green olives with pimento. Salty, briny, a little sharp, against the mild, creamy egg. She spread it thick on toasted white bread, and then, because this was breakfast, she laid 2 strips of hot bacon across the filling before closing the lid. Cold salad, hot bacon, warm toast. The temperature contrast alone was worth the 25 cents. The women who had dropped their husbands at the aircraft plant and their children at school would settle in around 9, order the egg and olive and a coffee, and have themselves 30 peaceful minutes. It was as much a ritual as a sandwich. Why did it vanish? Partly the counters closed, same sad song. But something subtler happened too. Egg salad got demoted, somewhere along the way, from ladies' luncheon elegance to picnic afterthought, and the olive version, the fancy version, fell first. If you want to taste 1951, it is 1 boiled egg and 6 olives away. Meanwhile, in Chicago, the men in the Loop were eating a breakfast sandwich with 3 stories and a toothpick, and it deserved its own skyline. Number 16, the Breakfast Club Sandwich, the Star Grill, on Wells Street in Chicago, Illinois, 1955, in the shadow of the elevated tracks, where the whole counter rattled gently every time a train went over and nobody looked up from their coffee. A club sandwich at lunch was standard American engineering. 3 decks of toast, turkey, bacon, lettuce, tomato. The Star Grill morning man, a broad-shouldered Greek named Gus who ran his griddle like a rail yard, asked the obvious question, why should the club sleep in? His breakfast club went up in 3 stories. Bottom deck, buttered toast, then a folded ham omelet trimmed square with the edge of his spatula, so it fit the bread like a fitted sheet. Middle deck of toast, then 3 strips of bacon and 2 thick slices of ripe tomato, salted. Top deck of toast, and the whole tower pinned at 4 corners with frilled toothpicks and cut into 4 triangles that stood points up on the plate like a little mountain range. 40 cents, the most expensive breakfast sandwich on this list so far, and the traders and printers and railroad clerks paid it gladly, because it ate like a full plate you could hold in one hand while you read the morning paper folded in the other. Gus sold 100 on a Good Friday. What became of it? Breakfast in America got faster, is what happened. A 3-decker takes minutes to build and 2 hands to respect, and by the time the 70s arrived, breakfast downtown was a donut in a bag from a chain, eaten walking. The clubs went back to lunch and stayed there, but the next sandwich never had a lunch to retreat to, because the next sandwich was made of waffles, and it lived and died at breakfast alone. Number 15, the waffle sandwich. Duke's Diner, Toledo, Ohio, 1957. A genuine chrome car out on the Dixie Highway with a neon sign that buzzed the word "Eat" into the dark, and inside, a waffle iron that Duke himself had bought second-hand from a hotel and kept polished like a trophy. The waffle sandwich started with batter Duke let rest overnight, which made his waffles crisp as crackers outside and light as air inside. He baked them a shade darker than most, because they had a job to do. 1 whole round waffle, quartered. Between 2 of those quarters went a slab of griddled ham and a fried egg with the yolk broken, and the top quarter was pressed down just enough for the yolk to seep into the pockets of the waffle. And then, right at the window, his daughter Carol would pour a ribbon of warm maple syrup over the top and dust it with powdered sugar, and she always said the same thing when she set it down. "Careful, honey, it bites back." 35 cents. Truckers running the Dixie Highway planned their fuel stops around it. Sunday mornings after church, families stood 3 deep behind the stools waiting for a seat, boys in clip-on ties negotiating with their mothers for a second one. It was sticky, it was a little ridiculous, it required a stack of paper napkins, and it was glorious. It vanished when the diner closed in 1968, the year the interstate opened and took the through traffic away, and though other places tried waffle sandwiches now and again, none of them rested the batter overnight, and everyone could tell. Now, our next griddle man would have scoffed at powdered sugar, because in Detroit, breakfast was not sweet. Breakfast came off the corned beef, and it came with muscle behind it. Number 14. The corned beef hash and egg sandwich. The Woodward Grill, Detroit, Michigan, 1950, a stone's throw from the streetcar line, feeding the first shift of the greatest manufacturing city on earth. The hash at the Woodward was made, not opened. Sunday corned beef, chopped by hand with boiled potatoes and plenty of onion, bound with a little of the cooking broth, and spread across the griddle in a wide sheet that sizzled all morning long, getting scraped, turned, and pressed until it was shot through with crusty brown edges. That crust was currency. Regulars would ask for it crispy, and the griddle man, a quiet Pole named Stefan, with forearms like bridge cables, would carve their portion from the edge of the sheet where the crust ran deepest. For the sandwich, he packed a steel ring with hash right on the griddle, pressed it down hard, and let it fry into a patty that held together like a hamburger. Onto a toasted Kaiser roll it went, with a fried egg on top, cooked over easy so the yolk broke into the crevices of the hash, and a stroke of ketchup or horseradish sauce, your choice. 30 cents, and it sat in a hand with real weight, a tool for a 10-hour day. The line men ate them by the thousands, and on payday Fridays, Stefan cracked the eggs 2 at a time. Its decline was the story of the city itself. The plants shrank, the shifts thinned, canned hash elbowed the real thing off the menu at the places that survived, and a sandwich built on Sunday leftover corned beef made no sense anywhere that never cooked a corned beef on Sunday. Hold your fork, though, because we are about to leave bread behind entirely. The next sandwich on our countdown is the one I promised you at the top of the morning, the one with no bread at all, and it may be the purest piece of American breakfast thinking on this entire list. Number 13. The hot cake sandwich. Here it is, the one with no bread. The Husker truck stop on Highway 30 outside Grand Island, Nebraska, 1955. Open all night. Coffee a nickel. The parking lot full of grain trucks idling in the dark. The griddle man on the morning shift was a big, gentle fellow named Vern, and Vern had noticed something about his customers. They ordered hot cakes, and they ordered bacon and eggs, and then half of them stacked it all together and ate it with their hands anyway, syrup dripping off their wrists, because a trucker eats the way a trucker eats. So Vern did the sensible thing and put it on the menu. 2 hot cakes, poured small and thick, about the size of a saucer, so they set up sturdy. Between them, 2 strips of bacon, broken in half to make 4, and 1 egg fried hard as a poker chip, no runny yolk on a steering wheel. The whole thing got a pat of butter on top, a quick baptism of syrup, not a flood, just enough to glue it, and then it was pressed flat with the spatula, wrapped in waxed paper, and handed across the counter in under 4 minutes. 25 cents. The drivers called it a Nebraska sandwich, and they carried the smell of it out the door and across 3 states. No bread, no plate, no fork, and no apologies. It was breakfast reduced to what a working person actually needs at 5 in the morning, which is heat, salt, sweet, and something to hold. It disappeared when the interstate came through 11 miles south and the Husker went dark in 1969, and the chains that replaced it would eventually sell you something similar, wrapped in plastic, microwaved. It is not the same, and you know it is not the same. Now we trade the flatlands for the bluegrass, because down in Kentucky there was a breakfast sandwich you had to earn with a hammer. Number 12. The country ham on a beaten biscuit. Bardstown, Kentucky, 1946, at the Dixie Cafe on the Courthouse Square, where the morning light came through gold-lettered windows and the smell of frying ham reached the sidewalk before you did. The bread here was the beaten biscuit, and it is nearly a lost art now. This was not the soft, fluffy biscuit you are picturing. Beaten biscuit dough was worked, pounded, folded, and pounded again, hundreds of strokes, until it blistered and turned silky, then rolled thin, pricked with a fork, and baked into a small, crisp, ivory-colored biscuit that kept for days and split clean as a shell. At the Dixie, an older lady named Miss Pearl made them in the back with a cranked machine called a biscuit break, and the crank of it was the sound of 6 in the morning on that square. Into each split biscuit went country ham, and I mean real country ham, salt-cured for months in somebody's smokehouse, sliced thin as paper, fried fast in a black skillet until the edges frilled. Nothing else. No butter, no mustard, no egg. The dry, crisp biscuit, the intense, salty, sweet funk of the aged ham, 2 bites, done. They were sold 3 to a plate for 30 cents, and there were men around that courthouse, lawyers and farmers alike, who measured their whole week from Saturday's plate of them. Why did they vanish? Because the beaten biscuit takes an hour of labor for a food that is gone in 2 bites, and when Miss Pearl passed in 1959, nobody wanted to inherit the crank. Country ham survives, thank goodness. The biscuit that carried it mostly does not. From the oldest sandwich on our list, we jump to the newest thing on 4 wheels, because out in California, breakfast was learning to roller skate. Number 11. The French toasted ham and egg. The Carousel Drive-In, Glendale, California, 1956. A great neon merry-go-round of a place on the boulevard, where car hops on roller skates, hooked trays over the window of your Chevrolet, and the morning smelled like orange juice and gasoline and possibility. The Carousel's claim to fame was what the menu called the French toasted sandwich. The cook took 2 slices of good white bread and made a plain, honest sandwich of griddled ham and a thin folded omelet, with a slice of American cheese between them. Then he dipped the whole assembled sandwich, the entire thing, into an egg and milk batter with a whisper of vanilla and laid it on the buttered griddle. It fried up like French toast on the outside, golden and custardy, while the cheese inside melted and soldered the layers together. It was cut on the diagonal, dusted with powdered sugar, and served with a paper cup of warm syrup for dunking, right on the car tray. 50 cents, which was Hollywood pricing, and nobody blinked. Young couples ate them after church. Studio carpenters ate them at dawn on the way to the lot. Teenagers ordered one with 2 forks, which was as close to a proposal as some of them ever got. Sweet and salty, crisp and soft, breakfast and dessert holding hands. The drive-ins themselves were the reason it vanished. When the big burger chains took over the boulevards in the 60s, speed beat spectacle, the car hops hung up their skates, and a sandwich that needed a batter dip and a careful griddle man did not fit through a drive-through window. The lot where the Carousel stood is a bank now. Of course it is. But do not put away your sweet tooth yet, because down in Georgia, they were pairing pork with fruit in a way that would make you write home to your grandmother. Number 10. The Sausage and Apple Butter Biscuit. The Dogwood Grill, Macon, Georgia, 1958. A white clapboard cafe on the road north of town, with a screen door that announced every customer and a kitchen run entirely by a husband and wife, Otis at the griddle and Louvenia at the oven. Louvenia's biscuits were tall, cathead biscuits, big as a fist, brown on top and steaming when torn, and they came out in sheet pan waves every 20 minutes from 5 in the morning on. Otis made his own sausage, seasoned heavy with sage and black pepper and a mean little pinch of red, patted into patties and fried on the griddle until the edges laced. The sandwich was simplicity itself, and it was perfect. A hot split biscuit, a sausage patty tucked in, and then a generous spoonful of dark apple butter, the kind cooked down all day in the fall until it turns the color of mahogany, spread right on the sausage while everything was hot. The spiced apple melted into the pork fat, sweet meeting sage, and men who had been up since 4 with the tobacco or the trains would close their eyes at the first bite, every single time, like they were saying grace twice. 15 cents. Luvania sold them out the back door by the sackful to men who could not sit at the counter in those years, and she made sure the sacks were heavy. It faded for the gentlest of reasons. Otis and Luvania grew old. The children moved to Atlanta, and homemade apple butter became a farm stand memory as the orchards south of town gave way to subdivisions. The chains sell a sausage biscuit today on every corner of this country. Not one of them has ever thought to reach for the apple butter, their loss and ours. And now, friend, we step through a set of chrome-framed glass doors in New York City into a marble palace where breakfast came out of a wall. Number 9. The Automat Bacon and Egg on a Kaiser Roll, New York City, 1950. At the Great Automat on Broadway, a cathedral of chrome and marble, where an entire wall was made of little glass doors, and behind each door waited a plate. You changed your dollar with the nickel thrower, a woman with rubber thimbles on her fingers, who could count coins faster than the eye could follow, and you walked the wall like a museum. Behind one row of those doors every morning sat the bacon and egg on a Kaiser. Now, here is what people never realized. Behind that wall of little doors was a full, roaring kitchen, and men at griddles working just as hard as any diner man in America. The sandwich was built to survive its weight behind the glass. A proper Kaiser roll with a shine on its crown, sliced and buttered to the edge because the butter sealed the roll against the steam. The egg was fried in a ring, firm but tender, seasoned properly. 3 strips of bacon were laid in a triangle, so every bite would find one. The roll went together still warm into the little chamber, and the door clicked shut like a jewel box. 2 nickels. You dropped your coins, turned the chrome knob, lifted the door, and there was your breakfast. And somehow, ask anyone who did it, the little door made it taste better. Office girls in white gloves and stockbrokers and sign painters all stood at the same standing tables, strangers sharing salt. The automats died slowly through the 60s and 70s, done in by inflation, by the suburbs, by hamburger chains, and when the last wall of doors went dark, New York lost the most democratic dining room it ever had. A nickel never bought so much dignity. From the biggest city in the country, we now go to a town in Oklahoma you could cross in 2 minutes, where the griddle men did something to an egg that nobody else in America thought to do. Number 8. The Onion Pressed Egg Sandwich. El Reno, Oklahoma, 1948, at a 6-stool grill called Pete's on Route 66, in the town that already knew a secret the rest of the country is still catching up on. Out there, since the lean years of the Depression, cooks had smashed thin-shaved onions into their hamburgers to stretch the meat, and the onions caramelized on the griddle into something sweeter than the beef itself. Pete's morning cook, a leathery little man named Cy, ran the same play at breakfast. He piled a handful of onion, shaved so thin it was nearly transparent, right on the hot griddle, cracked 2 eggs on top of the pile, and then pressed the whole thing flat with his spatula, hard, until the egg ran down through the onion and set around it like lace. It fried until the bottom was deep brown and frizzled, one confident flip, 30 seconds more, and this onion and egg raft, crisp at the edges, sweet and steamy in the middle, went onto a toasted bun with a slice of American cheese and a shot of black pepper. 15 cents. Coffee included if Cy liked your hat. The oil field workers and the Route 66 travelers ate them at all hours, and the smell of those onions hitting the steel at 5 in the morning could pull a hungry man off the highway from a quarter mile out. It never spread, and it barely survived. The interstate bled Route 66 dry through the 60s, the little grills closed by the dozen, and while El Reno held on to its onion burgers at lunch, the breakfast version quietly slipped off the menus, remembered now only by the oldest heads in Canadian County. If you ever find yourself with a hot pan and one onion, you know what to do. Meanwhile, down on the Gulf, breakfast was being built on bread you can only get where the air is damp, and it came with gravy. Number 7. The Breakfast Po' Boy. Verrett's Coffee Stand, near the French Market, New Orleans, Louisiana, 1949, open from 4 in the morning for the dock workers and the market men, with chicory coffee so strong it could argue back and ceiling fans that never stopped turning. New Orleans French bread is its own miracle, a crust that shatters like an eggshell over a crumb as light as cotton, and it does not survive shipping, which is why this sandwich lives and dies within one city. Verrett's morning po' boy was a foot of that bread, split and swabbed with butter, toasted cut side down on the flat top. Onto it went thick slices of baked ham, fried on the griddle until the sugared edges charred, then 2 eggs fried soft, and then, the New Orleans signature, a ladle of pan gravy made from the ham drippings, poured right over the eggs so it soaked into the crumb of the bread while the crust stayed crisp. Dressed, if you wanted it, with a swipe of Creole mustard. It was served on butcher paper with a cup of that chicory coffee, 40 cents all in, and the men from the banana boats ate them standing up, elbows on the marble, before the sun found the river. The gravy was the whole argument. Anyone can stack ham and eggs. It takes a certain civilization to sauce them at 5 in the morning. The little coffee stands faded through the 60s as the docks mechanized and the market crowd thinned, and the great morning po' boy retreated into memory, surviving in fragments here and there, but never again, as the daily bread of working New Orleans. And now the countdown turns west again, to the Texas Panhandle, where breakfast came with a knife, and nobody thought that was strange. Number 6. The steak and egg on Texas toast. The Longhorn Grill, Amarillo, Texas, 1959. A low brick building on Route 66, with a neon steer on the roof, and cattle trucks nose to tail in the lot, from 4:30 in the morning. This was cattle country breakfast, and the Longhorn did not apologize for it. The griddle man, a former ranch cook everyone called Windy, took a thin-cut sirloin, the kind that fries in 2 minutes, seasoned it with nothing but salt, coarse pepper, and a drop of Worcestershire, and slapped it on the hottest corner of the griddle, where it hissed like rain on a tin roof. Texas toast, and let us pause to honor it, bread sliced double thick, buttered on both faces, griddled to a crunch outside, while the middle stayed soft as cake. The build was pure panhandle. 1 slab of toast, the steak laid on whole, a fried egg over easy on top of the steak, so when you cut in, and yes, this sandwich came with a knife and fork crossed over it like a coat of arms, the yolk ran into the meat, and the toast caught every drop. A dash of hot sauce for those who leaned that way, 65 cents, the price of a big morning, and the cattleman paid it without looking up. It was the most expensive item on this list so far, and the most honest. The end came with the interstate, same killer, different town. The trucks moved to the new highway, the neon steer came down in 1972, and steak at breakfast slowly turned into a special occasion hotel dish instead of a working man's Tuesday. Now, I promised you a sandwich built on a donut, and I keep my promises. Iowa, get ready to take a bow. Number 5. The Glazed Donut and Ham. The Spinning Wheel Cafe, Des Moines, Iowa, 1961, 2 blocks from the state fairgrounds, with a donut machine in the front window that dropped rings of batter into hot fat in a slow, hypnotic parade that could hold a child spellbound for an hour. The spinning wheel glazed them warm, and they sold by the dozen, but the sandwich was an accident. The story the waitresses told was that a regular named Harold, a hog buyer with a big laugh, once slid his ham over onto his donut plate on a dare, and the owner watched him eat it and went quiet, the way businessmen go quiet when they smell money. Within a month it was on the board. One fresh glazed donut, split through the equator like a bun, laid face down on the griddle until the glaze caramelized into a thin sheet of crackling candy. Between the halves, a round of griddled ham cut to fit, and a fried egg, hard yolk, so the whole thing held. The heat did something unreasonable to it. Salty ham, warm sweet glaze, the faint crunch of caramelized sugar, the soft rich crumb of the donut. People drove in from 3 counties during Fair Week, 30 cents, and worth every look your doctor would give you. The men called it sinful, and ordered 2. It vanished with the cafe itself in 1970 when the block was cleared for a parking structure, and for decades afterward, the idea sounded like a tall tale, until state fairs revived versions of it in our own time and acted like they had invented it. They did not invent it. Harold the hog buyer invented it, on a dare, and now you know. 4 sandwiches left, friend, and every one of them is a heavyweight. The next one has a jersey number in the great state of New Jersey. Number 4, the pork roll, egg, and cheese on a hard roll. Nick's Lunch, Trenton, New Jersey, 1954, a steamed window storefront between a shoe factory and a union hall, with a counter worn smooth as a saddle by 30 years of elbows. Now, New Jersey, I know you are already standing up, and I know half of you call it by another name, and the other half are ready to fight about it, and that argument is itself part of the recipe. Pork roll is a Jersey institution older than the light bulb, a smoky, salty, faintly tangy cylinder of cured pork that exists almost nowhere else on the planet and does not need to, because Jersey eats enough of it for everybody. Nick cut it in slices, thick as a checker, and like the bologna men of Ohio, he cut notches around the rim so it would lie flat, which in Trenton they called giving it fins. The slices fried in their own fat until the edges went bronze and crisp. The roll was a true hard roll, crusty outside, pillowy inside, from the Italian bakery across the street, and it was never toasted because the softness was the point, the way it gave and then held. 2 slices of pork roll, an egg fried over easy, a slice of American cheese melted over the meat, salt, pepper, ketchup, done, wrapped in paper, and out the door in 90 seconds. A quarter. The factory men ate one at 6 and bought another for their coat pocket at noon. Here is the strange fate of this sandwich. It never actually died in New Jersey, and it never truly lived anywhere else. The factories closed, the men scattered south and west through the 70s, and wherever they landed, they searched diner menus in vain and phoned home like homesick soldiers, begging relatives to ship it frozen. A sandwich does not have to disappear from the map to be lost. Sometimes it just stays home when you cannot. Our next one, though, belonged to every corner of the country for one glorious stretch, and then the calendar itself turned against it. Number 3, the bacon, egg, and tomato. The Sunrise Diner, Allentown, Pennsylvania, 1953, a gleaming silver car parked beside the truck route, where the waitress, a fast-talking sweetheart named Dolores, wore a pencil behind each ear and called every customer by name or by Han, whichever came first. The summer special at the Sunrise was chalked on the board from July to the first frost, and it was 3 words long: bacon, egg, tomato. This was the breakfast child of the BLT, and in tomato season, it outsold everything in the house. The griddle man built it with the care of a jeweler. White toast, buttered edge to edge. Mayonnaise on both faces, thin, disciplined. 4 strips of bacon fried to a snap and drained on newspaper. 1 egg, over medium, the yolk just barely set, so it dressed the sandwich without escaping it. And then the crown, 2 slices of a Jersey beefsteak tomato, cut thick as your thumb, salted and peppered while the bacon grease was still warm on them. The heat of the egg and bacon against the cool, acid sweetness of that tomato. Han, There are marriages built on less. 30 cents in season. Dolores swore truckers timed their August runs through the Lehigh Valley around it, and nobody who saw the counter on a Saturday doubted her. So what happened? The tomato happened, or rather, it stopped happening. Through the 60s and 70s, the great local beefsteaks gave way to pale, hard supermarket tomatoes, bred to travel instead of taste, and a sandwich with 3 ingredients cannot hide a bad one. The special quietly came off the boards, not because anyone stopped loving it, but because the star of the show stopped showing up. 2 sandwiches to go now, and the next one carries the name of a city on its back. And once upon a time, it was the most famous sandwich order west of the Mississippi. Number 2. The Denver. The Mile High Grill, Denver, Colorado, 1941, downtown on Larimer Street. In the days when the stockyards still perfumed the morning air, and the counter opened at 5 for the railroad men. The Denver sandwich, some said Western, but not within city limits, was the king of its region for half a century. Chopped ham, chopped onion, chopped green bell pepper, beaten into 2 eggs, and cooked on the griddle as a firm, tidy omelet, exactly the size of the bread, then slipped between 2 slices of buttered toast. That was the whole architecture, and the old-timers told a story about its birth, that it began in the cook cars of the railroads and the camps of the frontier, where eggs arrived by wagon a little past their prime, and the onion and pepper and salty ham were there to cover the evidence. By the time the Mile High was flipping them, the eggs were fresh, and the disguise had become the treasure. The griddle man, a straight-backed veteran named Roy, had the motion down to poetry, a handful of ham and vegetables scattered on the steel, the beaten egg poured over, a shake of the pan he kept just for shaping, the fold, the flip, the trim, toast, omelet, toast, cut diagonal, 35 cents, next order. It was on every diner menu from Chicago to the coast, and a traveler could measure a town by its Denver. And then, slowly, the country stopped ordering it. The omelet moved to a plate and got fancy, the breakfast sandwich moved to a paper wrapper and got fast, and the Denver, which was neither fancy nor fast, fell into the gap between them. By the 80s, it was a menu ghost, a line the old-timers ordered, and the young cooks had to ask about. Which brings us, at last, back to Scranton. The griddle is still hot at the Majestic Diner, Earl Dempsey is reaching for his spatula, and it is time to watch the champion get made. Number 1. The Fried Egg Sandwich. Scranton, Pennsylvania, 1947, 6:40 in the morning, and the counter at the Majestic is full. Miners with coal, still shadowing their knuckles, nurses coming off nights at the state hospital, a beat cop, with his hat on the stool beside him, like a small, loyal dog. Earl Dempsey stands at the griddle with a towel over his shoulder, and he does not ask most of them what they want, because he already knows. The egg sandwich, 15 cents. The best-selling breakfast sandwich in America for 30 years, and the most completely forgotten, because it was never written down, never advertised, never crowned. It was simply everywhere, until it wasn't. Watch him now. A knob of butter on the steel, not grease from the can, butter, because eggs deserve it. 2 slices of white bread, laid right into that butter, to toast on one side only, so the sandwich would be crisp outside and tender within. 1 egg, cracked with one hand, into the butter beside the bread. He salts it the moment it hits, peppers it generously, and when the white is set, he breaks the yolk with a corner of the spatula and folds the egg once, like closing a letter he has written 10,000 times. The egg goes between the bread, toasted sides out. That is the sandwich. Butter, bread, egg, salt, and pepper. Ketchup bottle on the counter for those who want it, and a cup of coffee alongside, and the whole transaction, 15 cents, took 40 seconds, and came with your name remembered. Why was this the one they loved best? Ask anyone who stood in Earl's line. Because it asked nothing of you, and gave you everything it had. It was the sandwich of men who counted their change, of widows who ate at counters so the morning would have voices in it, of kids sent to fetch breakfast with a dime and a nickel squeezed in their fist, and it vanished the quietest of all. Nobody killed it. The diners closed or changed hands, the chains wrapped their own egg sandwich in yellow paper and sold it by the billion, and the real thing, Buttercrisp, one egg, made by a man who knew your name, just slipped out the back door of American life without anyone saying goodbye. Earl worked that griddle until 1966. The Majestic came down for a parking lot 4 years later, and to this day, in Scranton, there are people in their 80s who will tell you, with their eyes closed, exactly what that 15-cent sandwich tasted like at 6:40 in the morning in October, when the griddle was hot and the whole world was about to begin. So there they are, 25 breakfast sandwiches, 25 counters, 25 mornings that America used to share, elbow to elbow, before we all started eating alone in our cars. Every one of them was made by somebody who knew the regulars by name, and every one of them disappeared for reasons that had nothing to do with how they tasted. Maybe that is the real recipe we lost, not the bologna, or the beaten biscuit, or the apple butter, but the stool, the counter, the refill you didn't have to ask for, the griddle man who saw you come through the door and started your order before you sat down. If one of these sandwiches brought back a morning you had forgotten, a diner, a drugstore, a waitress who called you Han, I would truly love to hear about it in the comments, because the memories you all leave under these videos are better than anything I could write, and I read every single one. Somewhere out there, a griddle is still warming up in the dark, and somebody's coffee is already poured. Thank you for sharing your morning with me, friend. Until next time, keep those memories warm.